Hey, somebody's got to make a barrel. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. Our sponsor this week is a global member-based training organization, IAITAM.org, pronounced ITAM.org, is in fact the only global training organization turning out IT asset managers that corporations immediately hire all over the world. So check them out. How would you like to complete an accredited online program and get a degree that's actually in huge demand? In huge demand by whom? Well, just go to IAITAM.org and look through their client list. You'll see everyone from Sony Pictures to NASA to the United Nations. Google is one of ITAM's clients. Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Microsoft, Apple. These companies only hire the people that ITAM has trained because ITAM offers the only accredited degree in the field. That's ITAM.org. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And today's guest is, I am excited about this because he knows a lot about something that I don't know a lot about. And I was introduced to this gentleman by Dave Ramsey at Dave's house, which if you're ever wondering about Dave's house, you know, they say that Disneyland, the entire Disneyland can fit in the parking lot of Disney World. Well, the entire city of Nashville can fit inside Dave Ramsey's house. And that's where I met this guy. He has become a friend. He is the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Louisville Distilling Company, which produces the hottest bourbon brand out there right now, Angel's Envy. Please welcome Wes Henderson. Hey, Wes.
Thanks, Andy. Good to see you, and thanks for the kind of the warm up there. And I've got plenty of observations. I don't know how many answers I'm going to have, but we'll see.
Well, you will have many. You will have many. But it was awesome to be introduced to you by our mutual friend Dave Ramsey at his house. I remember Dave like waving me over, and you and he were talking, and he said, guess who this, because Dave is into this. He's into this. And he was so excited to introduce us. And so we have kept up since. And how do you get started in the distilling business?
Wow, it was that's a great story. But I do want to add one more thing about that visit with Dave. Is that an amazing time, put together an amazing group of people, and one of the reasons he wanted us to meet is really a big part of my job is telling stories. I'm talking about bourbon, I'm talking about my family, I'm talking about business, and you're one of the best storytellers in the world. And Dave says you got to meet Andy. He tells great stories. You tell great stories. So that was kind of the pretext of how it happened. So, but I'm so grateful that it happened that way. And just like I'm grateful that this little bourbon brand came together. There were a million reasons why it couldn't and shouldn't have happened.
I love your family story. And so start there.
Okay.
I think people will get a kick out of this.
Yeah, I grew up in this business. My father was the master distiller for a company called Brown-Forman for 40 years. And Dad created Woodford Reserve, Gentleman Jack Daniel's Single Barrel, a ton of other incredible, amazing products. So I go to work with Dad on weekends. Sometimes I was a science geek, so he'd let me play in the lab. And I'm sure that all the other lab people, when they got back to work Monday, they were all frustrated that a 5-year-old had been in there, messing with stuff. But that's how I fell in love with science. I didn't necessarily fall in love with bourbon, Andy. I didn't really, at that age, bourbon was a commodity. It was a product of agriculture. It was a scientific process, and that's what fascinated me. And it wasn't until much later in life that I started to appreciate that history, but, and appreciate my dad's. Look, my dad was the guy that went to work and reeked of whiskey all day, it wasn't necessarily anything special, because that's what my dad did. Now, looking back, it was very special because he was so significant in this business. But I'm sure a lot of people have this same situation in family businesses, and when they have fathers who are icons, and it's just finding out how it all fits together.
Well, how many master distillers are there?
Well, now there are
that's
a lot.
Rare thing, right?
Well, how many true master distillers? There are a handful. You see a lot of people calling themselves master distillers, and I think unfortunately it's become more of a marketing designation, as it has been a true master of the craft.
Right.
But I would say, before this explosion of bourbon, there might have been 5 or 6 I would really consider the true master distillers of bourbon. Most of them have passed away. Some have come up at what I would consider on par level, but still, if you look at the true masters, maybe now 10 or 15, in the entire world, that I would really say are master distillers.
Wow. And your dad has passed. What did you learn from your dad? I mean, not just in business, but in life.
I learned more about life than business from my father. I learned more about life than I did really distillation from my father. I certainly picked up all those things, but just the basis of how we run this business, the good humor, we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we do take seriously our craft and our team members, our larger family. And that's how Angel's Envy has grown. It's been very organic. It's very hands-on. We don't do advertising. We don't do anything like that. It's just one close-knit family, extended family around the world now that's united to make really good bourbon. And I learned that from my dad. One of the most important things I learned from my dad, though, was his dad was a quiet guiding presence, Andy. He let me do what he knew I could do well. He would validate, but he would let me make mistakes, which is great, which I'm very thankful for, and just a quiet, steady presence in the background.
Now, Wes, I have 2 boys. You have sons, and so how intentional are you in? How old are your sons?
My oldest is 32 and my youngest is 17. So there are 6 in total.
Okay.
And the 4 oldest work at the distillery right now.
My sons did not know my dad. And so I am very intentional on making sure that if they know me, they know my dad. And so how intentional have you become in passing on what your dad was to your children?
I think I don't know if it's a conscious thought process. I think by DNA, and I don't mean the biological DNA, I think just on how we are wired and how we operate on a daily basis and how we treat people, the examples that we set, be it in the business, be it in the community, be it public service or whatever, those are the best reflections that you can have. And that's really how the boys look at me. That's how I want them to remember me. Yeah, I created a successful bourbon business, but what has Dad done beyond that? How have we given back to the community? How have we made sacrifices to make the world better? And those examples are better than any dad sitting you down and giving you a hard talk lesson about something. I truly believe, because those are the things they remember.
So it's kind of the same thing. If they know you, they know your dad, and there you are. You're very serious about giving back to the community. Tell me about some of the works you guys are involved in as a family and as a business.
As a family, 4 of us are involved in emergency services in some shape, form, or fashion. Our state certified firefighters, volunteer.
Right, you are, right?
Correct, I am. I've started working with the county, though, as a death investigator. which is an oddball, probably kind of job. I've cut back at the fire department because I'm a little bit older. So I do death investigations with the coroner's office, and the other boys work at the various fire departments. And it's a pretty intense thing, but it's very helpful to people who are having the worst days of their lives. And I'm able to use my science background as well. So. We love things like Habitat for Humanity, where we can contribute and do stuff. But it seems like our family's really settled on the emergency services, that aspect of public service. And,
right. That volunteerism is a huge cultural benefit, I'm sure, not just to your family, to your children, but to your business. I would imagine that your extended family there probably takes their cue from you.
Well, I hope that they do, and I think that's the entire personality of the business. The Angels Envy has been so generous. The company has with our time, talent, and treasure, and we saw it during COVID when we made hand sanitizer and all the other things that everyone does. And leading by example, it means leading by example in all ways. In how you conduct yourself at business, how you conduct yourself out in the public and the community, how you conduct yourself at home with your families, people see those things, and you hope that look, nobody's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And you also want them to learn from your mistakes. What have we done that hasn't worked out well? So, it's very powerful, that moment kind of hit me over the last couple of years when my 19-year-old went into the fire service, into the academy. It's like, I never encouraged them to do that, to do those things. It was just a natural thing for them to do. And the only way they really, they said, well, Dad, we saw you do it. We thought it was interesting. We thought it was important. And because we saw you do it, that's one of the reasons that we're doing it. But I'm not having that conscious thought when I'm doing it,
Right.
And it's the same way with most dads, I'm sure.
I work with a lot of companies with their culture, and what you just described there, that's culture. Where things are happening without conscious thought, but the right things are happening without a conscious thought. But it takes a conscious thought to get it going at first. And you guys have done an excellent job of that. I remember that night when we were standing there on Dave's balcony and you explaining to me where the term Angel's Envy came from. Would you mind explaining that to the audience? I thought that was fascinating.
I would love to. And when I talk about the brand all the time, and for some reason, this is an aspect that I don't bring up until somebody asks me, which is insane because it's a very important part of the story. So
it's a great part.
It really is. It's one of the best stories behind the brand. So we have something in the business we call the Angel Share. And the Angel Share, so we put bourbon in barrels and it ages in barrels for a number of years. And when it sits in those barrels, you lose bourbon to evaporation. The wood is porous. It gets hot in those Kentucky warehouses. So we lose 3 to 5% a year to evaporation. So we say we're sharing that with the Angels as that goes up into the warehouse. So the story is the Angels get their share. What's left, they're envious of. And that's where the name Angels Envy came from. And it's a tension we have with the Angels. Can get a little contentious sometimes. We get theirs, they get ours, and everybody's happy at the end of the day.
I think that's just a great story. So how much Angels Envy? I have friends that I told, hey, today I'm going to be interviewing Wes Henderson, the head of Angels Envy, and they're like, oh my gosh. I mean, you have developed a reputation very quickly as being, if not the best, certainly among the best. And so how much of this do you guys make?
We'll do this year probably 180,000 cases somewhere along that level threshold. So 6 bottle cases. So if I could do some Kentucky math on it, around 1 million bottles or more.
Wow.
This year, and we are international. We launched in Rome, Madrid, where else? In Berlin this year, and we're looking to launch some other places also.
I've got my bottle that you signed in my office, so
I appreciate
I'm
that.
proud of my signed edition.
Well, thank you. You need to drink it, and then I'll sign another one for you.
Now, tell me what's behind you.
This is our distillery. And on each side of me, you see our fermentation tanks. You see our cooker over on this side at the very front. And that's the beginning. Actually, the beginning of the process is when we mill the grain. We have silos on the side of the building. We'll mill the corn, the rye, and the malted barley into like a powder. We'll cook it, and then we'll put it into fermentation tanks for a minimum of 70 hours. What you see on the sides and going back towards the front, you're looking towards the front of the distillery from this view. All those other tanks on the sides are fermentation tanks. So that mash will sit in that tank for 70 hours. We'll add yeast to it, and it'll end up converting to about 8% alcohol. It's like beer at that point, Andy. It's very much like beer. And then I'll move my head a little bit. Directly behind me is our column still. After we ferment it for that 70 hours, we'll run it through that column still. It'll come out at 138 proof. We'll stick it in a barrel and wait, and then we have bourbon. So that's our entire facility that you see behind us for distillation anyway. It's a beautiful picture, I think.
So what is unusual about Angel's Envy?
One of the things that we've become known for is for years and years, Scotch whiskeys have done secondary barrel finishes. So by secondary barrel, they age it in one barrel for the bulk of the aging. Then they'll put it in another barrel to impart unique flavors or additional flavors. Nobody had done it with bourbon before. We were really the first to do it with bourbon. So our bourbon is aged, our core bourbon is aged in a new charred oak barrel. Then we finish it in a port wine barrel. That's the secondary barrel. It smooths it out. It adds some dried fruits. It does some incredible things. And when we started doing that was just where we were going to start. We didn't necessarily believe that this was going to be the cornerstone of the business, but people went crazy for it. So we have a rye whiskey that's finished in rum barrels. We have finished whiskeys in sherry barrels, Japanese oak barrels, tawny port barrels, all these other finishes. So we've really became known for the pioneer in the secondary barrel finish. And that's what we're really other people are doing it now. Some of them are doing a decent job. I think really we probably do the best at it, and we just keep plugging along and trying to be innovative, and it's worked for us.
Well, this may be kind of a silly question, but I'm just curious. What kind of wood are the barrels made from?
It's white oak. The first barrels we use, they come from the Ozarks. It takes about 70 to 80 years to grow the wood to get a tree. And by the way, we are replanting oak trees every year to replace those trees. That's a big initiative that we have going on. So it's white oak, white American oak for start, but it just the regulations just specify a charred oak container. So it can be any type of oak. We have Japanese oak, like I mentioned earlier, but American white oak seems to work the best. It's got the porous nature of the sugars, the porous nature of that particular variety of wood, the way it toasts, the way it chars is just really perfect for
and it doesn't have the tannins that the red oak has in it.
That's correct.
So, yeah, well, that's curious to me, because the longest commissioned warship in the U.S. Navy, the USS Constitution, is made of white oak. And I don't know if you know this, but the government actually owns a forest outside of Indianapolis that like 80 something acres of white oak that are just for refurbishing the Constitution.
I didn't know that, and that's a great that's a great story, and it's very much in line with our Toast the Trees promotion, which we do every September, where we replace those trees, like I mentioned. It's a social media thing. Last year, we planted 50,000 oak trees or 55,000 oak trees because of the social media response. This year, we're trying to do, I think, 65,000. And so we've up to this point, we have planted more oak trees than what we've used for wood. And but that really resonates with me. And we started the program, Andy. I thought, when the marketing team came to me and they said, well, we're going to plant these oaks, I thought, okay, this is cool. It's socially minded, but as a child of the 80s, I didn't grasp what we were doing. I didn't grasp the enormity of planting hundreds of thousands of trees and how it affects the climate. Now I'm on fire with this stuff. I mean, we're planting trees all over the place, and I've kind of a new appreciation for that type of conservation and reclaiming deforested land and all these other things that started out as just a little simple idea.
That is awesome. And white oak is also, that's the preferred wildlife food, acorns from a white oak tree, because they're sweet and they don't have the tannins in them that other species do. But you're planting a lot for wildlife too.
We are. Now, if I could just keep the squirrels out of my backyard, they're eating those acorns, and we'll be just fine.
Yeah, as long as they just eat the acorns and don't eat the wire out of your car, because they'll do that too.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, what is new? What are you guys doing new? What are you working on now?
Right. The international expansion is a pretty big deal now that COVID is a little bit behind us. Those plans I got back from Australia the 14th of March last year, right before, literally the day before COVID, 2 days before we shut things down. So
right.
Picking up there, still continuing with innovation. We have 26 or some odd different innovations in process, and those are fun. They really are. You would be surprised at how much innovation starts at my kitchen counter on a Sunday afternoon when the boys are over for dinner or the families are over. Somebody will bring over something that they think is unique, something that we want to taste, or we've got some blends we've been working on. That's how I've got this multi-zillion-dollar research lab and R&D lab. And most, if not all, of our R&D takes place on my kitchen counter to start.
Wow. Your 5-year-old dreams came true. You have your own lab now.
I used to have it I had a walk-in closet when I fermented little vials of alcohol. I wasn't drinking it, but I was just fermenting. And I also had a microscope, and I would look at the yeast cells, and I also was fascinated with blood. So I'd make my parents let me stick their finger to get blood and put it on a stain it so I could look at it on my microscope. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But all that fun led up to something, Andy. Look, I mean, our life experience is kind of, and it's funny, you don't know when you have a life experience where that's going to fit into the puzzle. You really don't. And that's the beauty. And the beauty of the unexpected and the surprises that have happened on this journey are the things that really jump out and resonate to me. The predictable stuff is predictable. The journey is in the unpredictable, and the surprises and the joys that happen.
I don't dislike generally people that I meet, but I don't just really like them all either, but you strike me as somebody that I just like you. You have a passion for your family and for life, and a very active imagination, a curiosity that I think makes you fun to be around. What do you do first thing in the morning? What do you do when you wake up? What's the first thing on your mind?
I don't know if my mind ever really stops. And you're the same way, I'm sure. we're always thinking of, well, first of all, what do I have going on today? Hopefully I didn't get interrupted during the night with with an emergency services run or an investigation or something like that.
Right.
That's the worst thing, is get yanked out of bed at 2 a.m. and be out on a case for 2 or 3 hours, because it kind of screws up the rest of your day, whatever.
Right.
You really have to plan around that. If I'm on call, doing investigations, and I have to plan the rest of my schedule accordingly. But I'm at the point now that I have a team that runs the day-to-day of the business, so I don't have to worry about the day-to-day. I have to be at the 50,000 foot level and protect the magic, to protect the culture, to make sure that in a business that is growing quickly, that it's growing the right way, and that we never forget how we got where we are. So it's a position of vigilance, and maybe you get back to Dad again. It's to my dad. It's a quiet presence that's not afraid to speak up when he needs to speak up, and
right.
but do it in a way that's constructive and helps everyone grow. But we've created something very special, and to maintain something very special, you have to continue to do special things. And so that's what I wake up in the morning is, how can I serve my team? How can I serve the people who care about Angels Envy, the fans of Angels Envy? How can I serve the community? And, and most importantly, how can I serve my family? Most people are probably like that.
Well, I think most good people are.
Yeah, I agree.
Here's a question I should have asked at the first, and I'm winding down. I know your time is precious, but I should have asked this at the first. But tell us about the laws regarding bourbon and Kentucky, because that's fascinating to me.
It is very fascinating, and there are a lot of misconceptions about the regulations, and some of them we allow to stay that way, that ambiguity.
Right.
It goes back to the storytelling.
Right.
There's so many rich characters and so many families and so many generations of good, bad, and indifferent.
Can't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So
yeah, never. So bourbon can be made really from a legal standpoint anywhere in the United States. It is a native United States spirit. 90% of the bourbon, 95% of the bourbon is made in Kentucky.
Okay.
Most people believe that bourbon has to be made in Kentucky.
That's what I thought. I thought to call it bourbon, you had to.
We will let people continue to believe that unless they ask us directly.
I'm sorry I asked.
Well, the house of cards has come down now. No, there's some great bourbon made in other states. So I cannot knock that. Uniquely American product can be made in anywhere in the United States. Kentucky probably has the best climate, the best agricultural positioning, the most experience, the generational experience to make the best bourbon. All those things really are what come together. And there are a ton of other rules and regulations on how we have to do it, using the new barrel, a bunch of other things also that preserve the integrity of what is bourbon and what is America's and Kentucky's native spirit.
Now, one of the things you've created is a new a cellar collection, right? With Angels Envy. Tell me about that.
The cellar collection is our canvas, or I think that's probably a good way to look at it. Our way to introduce new innovations. They're small batch runs. The last one we did just a few weeks ago is a Madeira barrel finish. We've done a tonic finish and we've done a sherry, Oloroso sherry barrel finish. So those are our ways to create unique expressions. They're limited releases. Some of them just are sold at the distillery. Some of them get a little wider, but it's interesting, Andy, when we do these, people start camping out outside the distillery the night before, and there will be a line around the block, to get these. And really, that's so heartwarming to me that, there are a million choices out there, a million choices in everything. There are a million choices in bourbon, that someone's going to take time out of their day to sit in line or camp in front of our distillery to buy something that I've created, and certainly for them, hoping they'll love it. but it's a really humbling, and I have a ton of gratitude. If anything you see from me is an immense amount of gratitude for all the blessings that we've been given with from the people who have helped us, who love us and love the family, love the bourbon.
Wow. Well, I've got two more questions. One is, what is the toughest business challenge you face right now? What do you look at and go, man, if I had a magic wand, I'd wave it over that?
Right now, we're still battling back from COVID. I think that's the most pressing. We're trying to get everything open, but remain safe with our teammates. That's from day one of COVID. And we did a fantastic job of protecting our team. So getting back to normal, getting the city of Louisville back to normal. We've had the challenges of COVID. We've had some serious social issues that needed to be addressed here, just like everywhere else. But Louisville was in the news for those things.
All right.
So we had that to really ponder as a city and as a leader in the community. It gave me time an opportunity to reflect on social injustice and other things that are happening here. So, we've got a lot of healing to do. So that wand would include getting us past COVID, getting us in more of a healing mode for the social injustice issues that are happening here, and promoting a bigger understanding,
Right.
So it's really not directly, the bourbon's going to sell, we're going to sell out everything. But we want to sell everything out in a way that we're doing all the right things everywhere else too.
That's awesome. That's just an awesome strategy. So here's one last question. I'm going to tee this one up for you, because this is one that you could answer in your sleep. But somebody like me, I wonder about this, and if I don't ask this question, there's going to be people that go, why didn't you ask him this? Or they'll ask me, and I'll go, I don't know. Right. And that is, from the time the grain is delivered to the time the bottle is boxed and pushed out the door, how long? How long a process is this?
It depends on the product. Our bourbon, generally about 6 years. We age our bourbon for 4 to 6 years. And it's a blend of all those different bourbons. So the longest for the bourbon would be 6 years, and another 6 months in that secondary barrel.
Right.
The rye whiskey can be 6 to 8 years in that barrel, and then another 18 months in the rum barrel. So then you're looking at 9+ years. We have other products and other blends that have been in a barrel for 15, 20 years. So it really depends on the variety. You can make bourbon out. You can push bourbon out the door in 30 seconds if you want to, but it's not going to look great. It's not going to taste great. It's not, it's not going to be what people expect bourbon to be. So right. It takes a minute. It really does, and it takes a huge leap of faith to have hundreds of millions of dollars in barrel inventory sitting in a warehouse with our fingers crossed, hoping that it's going to turn out the way we expect it to.
Oh, buddy, thank you so much for your time today. You are just a favorite of mine, and I appreciate you doing this. This is very, very interesting, and wish you all the best with your family, with your business, and just very much appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Likewise. And it's been too long. We need to, I'll get with you next time I'm down that way, and we can catch up. And then thanks to everybody who took the time to watch today and that supports Angels Envy. We really
How do we get in touch with you? Is there something we can put on the show notes? And
yeah, that's great. Best way is social media. It's at KY Bourbon Maker, at KY Bourbon Maker on all the social media channels.
Okay.
That's a great way. I interact quite a bit with folks on the social media. So thank you for reminding me of that, because I always forget that. Just invite me to where you are. Wherever. I love to come and visit people. I'm like the Bill Murray of the bourbon world. I show up at oddball places, and you never know when I'm going to show up with a bottle of bourbon in my hand.
Well, it'll be good stuff. So thank you so much, Wes Henderson, the co-founder of Angels Envy and the Chief Innovation Officer. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Snifters provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by oldfashionedlighterfluid.com. Are you frustrated lighting your charcoal grill? Can you recall the good old days when one match was all you needed? Well, friend, your troubles are over. Oldfashionedlighterfluid.com is now available. No longer will you have to use the government-approved safety water that's been passed off as lighter fluid for the past 2 decades. Remember when your dad would douse the charcoal, tell everyone to stand back and toss a single match into the grill? Take a trip down memory lane. Can't you just hear the whoomp? Can't you just picture the mushroom cloud rising from the patio? Now you can have those same results with oldfashionedlighterfluid.com. From a proprietary blend of moonshine, gasoline, and napalm, we ship in asbestos containers directly from China. That way you can have confidence in everything you order. Find us online at oldfashionedlighterfluid.com, home of the one match guarantee.